Something incredible has happened in Antarctica. The world's largest iceberg has started to move, and the satellite footage I'm going to show you in this video will blow your mind. I promise. So be sure to stay tuned until the end, and if you like it, I'll be galactically happy about a thumbs up and a comment, because that's how we get the algorithm to show this exciting topic to even more people. Thank you guys and welcome. Antarctica's biggest iceberg has started moving, and I think we all know what caused it. Okay, that's not really the explanation, but let's take a look at the unimaginable size of this iceberg called A23A. This icy colossus is the size of almost 800,000 football fields, and that is, after all, a recognized unit of measurement. With an area of almost 4,000 square kilometers and a thickness of around 400 m, A23A is not only a giant, but also an absolutely fascinating natural phenomenon. For comparison, the London Shard, which was Europe's tallest skyscraper for a long time, is just 310 m high. So if we were to transport a piece of this iceberg to London, this is what it would look like. By the way, I created this little video with an AI tool. It's off topic, but I wanted to say briefly how extremely fascinating the current progress in the field of AI is. But back to the icebergs themselves, A23A is relatively small compared to the largest iceberg of all time. This monster was sighted in 1956. As this was before the era of satellite imagery, its exact size is not known, but it has been estimated to be 335 kilometers long, 97 kilometers wide, and 31,000 square kilometers in area. We don't even have that many football fields. However, A23A currently holds the title of largest iceberg, and we can easily trace its history. Icebergs go through similarly dramatic existences as we humans. They are born, they die, in between they go to university, can't pay off their student loans, become addicted to gambling, and are left by their wife for a bigger iceberg. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they are born and die. A23A was born in August 1986, breaking away off the Antarctic coast, and it was the beginning of an epic journey. Its birth was part of a mass breakup of icebergs from Antarctica's Filchner ice shelf. At the time, the ice shelf was still home to a Soviet research station. This alone tells us that A23A is a few years old. The Soviets even sent an expedition to recover the equipment from the Drozhnaya 1 base because it had drifted into the sea with the broken ice. But A23A did not move far from shore before its keel became firmly anchored to the mud of the Weddell Sea floor. But this dormant phase is now over. The icy colossus has decided to set off. What will happen to our giant A23A now? Like most icebergs in the Weddell Sea, researchers now expect it to drift along the Antarctic circumpolar current and eventually end up in the South Atlantic. In this super spectacular image from the Sentinel-1 satellite, we can track the movement of A23A between October 19th and November 24th. Just imagine a gigantic ice island, bigger than many a state, drifting through the ocean. Crazy. And this path that it will take is also known as the Iceberg Avenue, because it is the typical path for all icebergs from this region. A bit like an elephant graveyard. Only without elephants and in the water. But otherwise the same. Between May and June, up to 1,000 icebergs take this route in some years. And incidentally, this is also the same movement of the water and the accompanying westerly winds that the famous British explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton used in 1916 to escape from Antarctica after losing his ship, the Endurance, in the deadly icy waters. Shackleton steered his lifeboat to South Georgia, an island where these large tabular icebergs can still be seen drifting offshore today. Through this rescue operation, Shackleton was able to save his entire crew from their own certain death. And this is exactly the path that A23A is likely to take, which could have drastic consequences for the environment. If it runs aground in South Georgia, for example, it could cause problems for the millions of seals, penguins, and other seabirds that breed on the island. A23A's massive mast could disrupt the animals' hunting routes and prevent them from feeding their young properly, as the iceberg melting on site would block the animals' feeding grounds and flush millions of tons of fresh water into the sea. I mean, penguin life is tough anyway, and when there's a colossal iceberg stuck in front of your breeding ground, you probably wish you could just fly away, which penguins can't do. Really tragic. But on the other hand, icebergs also play an immensely important role in Antarctic ecosystems. When these large icebergs melt, they release the mineral dust that was embedded in the ice when they were part of the glaciers that were scraped along the rocky Antarctic floor. This dust is a source of nutrients for the organisms that form the basis of the food chains in the ocean. So this whole process, iceberg formation, iceberg detachment, iceberg melting on the Iceberg Avenue, is an integral part of the Antarctic ecosystem. I find that incredibly fascinating, as does Dr. Catherine Walker of the Woods Hole Oceanographics Institution, who was born the same year as A23A, and she says, "In many ways, these icebergs are life-giving. They are the point of origin for a lot of biological activity. I identify with the iceberg. It's always been there for me." But now I hear some of you frantically asking,
"But why did it come loose now?"
The answer is, nobody knows for sure. The first idea, of course, was that it could be due to increased ocean temperatures as a result of climate change. But this could not be confirmed by initial analyses. Dr. Andrew Fleming from the British Antarctic Survey says, "I've asked a few colleagues about this and wondered if there might have been a change in water temperatures on the shelf that could have provoked this, but the view is that the time has simply come. It has been firmly anchored since the 1980s, and there simply comes a time when the effect of seawater and erosion processes causes the anchoring to become too weak and an iceberg becomes detached. Just think of the thousands of other icebergs that take the death journey across Iceberg Alley every year. Of course, the larger the iceberg, the longer it usually takes for the anchoring process to be released. But now it's over for A23A, and it's off on its last big cruise. Super spectacular, but not an unusual development, but simply the normal end of an iceberg's life. Or as Dr. Andrew Fleming sums it up, over time, it must lose so much size that it loses its grip and begins to move. Now it will be exciting to see whether A23A will really get stuck off South Georgia and disturb the animals there, or whether it will just drift by and then dissolve in the ocean. I will of course keep you up to date. But to make sure you don't miss it, you should subscribe to my channel now. The YouTube statistics have told me that over half of the viewers haven't subscribed, but it's absolutely free. It helps me immensely, and you'll never miss a galactic video again. So folks, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button now. Let's switch to the other side of the planet, because not far from the Arctic is at least as exciting as Antarctica. In Iceland, the long-awaited eruption of a mighty volcano has now occurred. An entire town had already been evacuated and volcanic gases were rising from the destroyed streets. So now the final eruption, you can see how devastating it was and how the local people are doing in the video below. Be sure to take a look. And if you want to support my work, I always look forward to your visit to the Astro Shop, because there you will find everything your Astro heart desires. I promise. Otherwise, I'd say let's see you for the next video, if you haven't melted by then. Take care, folks.